the members here. Thank you for inviting me to this global event. I'm going to talk today about enabling operationalization of AI, machine learning operations, automation at scale. This perhaps is a different topic than normal that you're going to talk about, but I'd like to show you a little bit about the scenario today in the industry. In the industry, there's a lot of artificial intelligence work going on. Some of it is machine learning driven, and the machine learning area is really developing fast. I mean, it's been here for many years since John McCarthy days, but right now, what is desirable, what is viable, and what is feasible is really changing as we encounter different spectrums of experiences here. I have personally been involved in rolling out many of the machine learning models for vision, for knowledge mining, for vaccination, for many other scenarios. And in each of these unique scenarios, I've observed different types of problems coming to bear. I'm going to talk about these 4 problems today. The questions that are posed here is, how might one establish a common data sciences environment across the enterprise? Because there are too many tools today. Secondly, how to provide a cohesive AI ML ops platform for code-based and non-code-based activities. There's a lot of low-code activities also happening today. And third, how might we get an integrated solution which will handle all 3, data ops, ML ops, and DevOps, all 3. And then finally, the question is, how do we scale it all up, right? How do we ensure that all the needs of data scientists are taken care of across the world? So these are the 4 problem areas. This is what people are desiring. So let me explain the problem in a little bit more detail. But let me start with the humans involved in the process first. These are the personas and the responsibilities that we can look at in any typical artificial intelligence lab or any kind of commercial facility for machine learning. The data engineer, the machine learning engineer, the application developers, the infrastructure and data architects are all the personas involved in activities around data ops, machine learning ops, and dev ops. And these are the 3 categories: data engineering, data sciences, and productionization. I'm going to focus today a little bit more on the one in the middle, but all 3 are important. And when you look at it holistically, operationalization requires us to look at all these 3 areas pretty well. So we need to understand the role of each one of these people and how we can help them achieve that goal of managing the environment in a seamless and simplified manner. So moving ahead, what occurs today in the AI ML labs is, there's a lot of manual processes, there's cut and paste activities, tedious verification steps. There's also a little bit of what you can call as tracking, and audit trail activities. So if you look at the specific area, version control creates a problem, and it becomes error prone, right? All the activities that you're doing becomes error prone. It's very highly dependent on people. There's no easy way to do continuous integration, continuous delivery. There's no clear way to monitor and assess any outages or issues that are being faced. It's difficult also to track the time. Time wastage is happening all throughout the process, all over the place, and there's no way to make it interoperable or expansible. So these are some typical challenges being faced by data scientists and data engineers in this space. But the real problem is not really AI. The problem is the plumbing around AI. As you can see here in this diagram, the ML coding part of it, machine learning part, is the small green box that you see. Around that, there are so many other activities that data scientists has to worry about, whether it is configuration, collection, feature extraction, data verification, process management, serving, monitoring. All these take time. And if you do a quick survey, you'll see that 80 to 90% of the time is spent on everything except the machine learning code itself. And so, when you look at the overall picture, we need to consider when we operationalize this, that we take care of all of these elements and try to solve the problem around it. Today, what's happening since 2021, 2022, and moving ahead, you see the big three cloud players releasing a lot of products. And this picture is attributed to Google, but it's pretty much the same in Microsoft Azure, in Amazon Web Services, AWS. You'll see similar features coming out, and AutoML becoming more and more pervasive all across. There are many pipelines in the process that needs to be orchestrated. There are many things to be continuously monitored. There are many metadata elements. There are experiments happening all over the place. So if you see the life cycle, it's becoming a little bit too difficult to manage. And while this is happening, the true work around artificial intelligence is continuously evolving. What I call as true intelligence, in one of the Stanford computer forums, there was a lot of discussion happening about how much work is happening on the left side and the right-hand side, LHS and RHS here. On the left side, you see recognition and perception activities, which are mostly machine learning driven. And on the right side, you see cognition, which are more thinking and understanding related activities. And what's happening is this line between these two sections, left and right, is starting to blur. Deep learning is encroaching on the right side towards deep thinking. And what you're seeing here is essentially a movement of activities and automation taking place where AutoML can be applied to much more activities in the deep thinking areas and the narrow domain areas. So what we see here is, like in the future of applied sciences here, of applied AI, much more of the cognitive services will become like recognition, more released as automated components. And we'll have to manage all of this in an evolving manner. So in the AI journey that most of the companies are facing today, the whole environment has become too fragmented, complex. There are many brittle components. And if you move one item out of this flow or move certain jobs out, if you change the place or location of clickstream or product data, everything breaks and all hell breaks loose. So this is becoming really difficult for data scientists as well as the people managing these environments to productionalize ML models. And as this happens, we need to think about the overall AI journey. Why is this happening? I mean, there's a lot of innovation in the AI space. It's a thriving ecosystem of innovation. Researchers are working on this from all angles, from all universities and research bodies. There are VCs involved in investing. And on the right side, you see procurement and DevOps within companies are facing a nightmare, really, of managing so many moving parts and so many different choices that the enterprise architects have to look through. So really, the problem is exacerbated when you look at the infrastructure side and the analytics side, the part which you can see over here around analytics and machine learning. And it's really confusing to people as to which area to focus on. As you see here, data science platforms, there are so many. Machine learning, there are so many choices and options. There's so many types of notebooks that people use, and data analyst platform. It's becoming really complex to manage. And the proposal here is to think clearly and structure our thoughts so that we can operationalize some of this. So the point being made here is the hard part about AI is really data, and data and code together, because code has dependency on data. If the data is bad quality, it's garbage in, garbage out for data scientists, software engineers. And the code itself requires tooling, and there are a huge amount of tools available and open source as well as proprietary tools that people are using. And as all this is coming together, integrating these tools, these components is itself causing another series of problems. As you can see here, depending on the platform, depending on the syntax, the use cases are getting blocked, and deploying it to different environments, hybrid cloud environments, is becoming even tougher. So keeping this in mind, the point here is that we must think in a different way. Thinking must shift to embrace operationalization, not just experimentation. And experimentation is happening today, and it's happening in pockets all over the place, and it's a little bit chaotic to manage. If we think about operationalizing it here, as you see on the right side, we'll need to automate certain processes. We'll have to integrate certain tool sets. We'll have to make it reusable, scalable, trusted, cost efficient, and ongoing, evolving. And in all of this, we have to keep in mind that AI needs to be done responsibly so that it doesn't affect or hurt any, entity or human involved in the process. So keeping this in mind, we need to remove these operational roadblocks. And I've just listed 6 of them. There might be more, but our research shows that infrastructure often becomes a roadblock in this managing different environments and deploying things across to production. Then the production monitoring itself, security, machine learning, testing, and modeling activities, iterative development, experimentation, and then data, basically versioning, hyperparameter tuning, all of that, causes roadblocks, and we need to think about solving this challenge or problem. So what are the other challenges that have been observed more recently in the last 2 or 3 years? We've seen that as data scientists are working on their models, concept drift is taking place where the accuracy of the model itself degrades. We are seeing that pre-trained models, their accuracy levels change due to locality, right? Demographics and geography changing. We see model governance impacting, MLOps adoption as people are trying to operationalize things. And we are also seeing the data quality really impacts the overall environment. So all these different areas, scalability, process and collaboration, model governance, concept drift, needs to be taken care in any kind of solution around operationalization. So I'm here to propose to you today the design considerations to make sure we can handle those challenges. And the first of this is automating relevant workflow steps so that you don't have too much manual intervention. We also need continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous testing that needs to be considered. And so these should be very primary in our design considerations around the whole life cycle. Versioning of machine learning models, data sets, as more and more experiments are happening, more products are being released, more predictions are being done. How do we version and make sure the right prediction goes out there is really critical. And tracking each of those multitude of experiments that are taking place today. Testing those features, those data models and data deployed into production, that needs to be validated, verified too. And then monitoring where it's performing well and how it's performing, making it a reproducible one where you can get identical results given the same input. So these are the 7 items proposed for design consideration. And I'll show you a quick view into the components. If you break these down into smaller blocks or components, the top chevrons indicate the main areas that we want to focus on, from use case discovery to data engineering to machine learning pipeline, production deployment, and production monitoring. And in each of these spokes or wheels, we'll have to make sure we cover and automate some of these activities. So moving ahead, what are the details behind this, right? And what are the process areas? Because we're looking at it from a system perspective, but what are the human processes today involved? And if you look at any MLOps lifecycle, it's not about 1 model or 2 models, it's N models that are being deployed. Governance needs to be deployed across all of this, whether you're doing feature selection, training, testing, deployment, or monitoring analytics. And you can see the types of questions that people are posing: how models are created, how models are packaged, how they can be integrated, how they can be deployed, how they can be evaluated for good use, how are they updated or moved into production. All of these are considerations. So the thought here is to break it down into 5 areas, 5 process areas: feature selection, training and testing, deployment, monitoring, and governance. And for each one of these, there are many areas of improvement that we can look at. I'm going to talk and show you a little bit of this, not all of them, but some of this can be automated very well. We can consider others also for automation, but the human supervision and element is important as we are accountable for responsible AI here. So just a quick example of a manual process. Initially, when you start off with machine learning operations, you can take data and keep it offline. extract data from it, prepare the data, train the models, evaluate the models, validate them, and then expose that trained model out into the IT world for serving to the audiences and run and do prediction services on top of it. This is one way of thinking about it. You can also semi-automate this or further automate it, but I'm going to jump directly to a model or framework which proposes that we automate elements of the release pipeline, the data pipeline, the modeling pipeline, and make it a little bit more streamlined and easy to use. And there are many platforms and tools that can be used for doing this, but the simplest way of thinking about this is to break it down into portions of the value chain that we want to improve. And so in this, what I'm suggesting is the data ops part and the machine learning ops part is considered together and connected in a way that continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous testing can take place along the way. So we should consider a differentiated approach, an approach which can be modified, like plug and play blocks, Lego blocks, which can be put together. We should consider an ability to do quick deployment because patience is running very thin over here. People are expecting a lot from artificial intelligence, and we need to show results. So we need to fail fast and learn quickly. We need to be able to pick and choose certain functionalities depending on the need of the hour. And we need to handle those business specific needs, in a standalone or customized fashion. And that can be done if we think about the various options here, like I've displayed a couple over here. I'll show you a little bit more about the options so that you understand what I'm talking about. Simplified options or recommendations from my end is to consider a native environment. Let's say you're working in AWS or Azure. If you're working only in Azure, stay native to that and use all the tools around that, whether it is for DevOps or ML, but try to automate it as much as you can. The other option is to use a platform like Databricks, which is based on Apache Spark, which can run on pretty much any cloud environment, and then plug it up with GitHub, which will allow you some amount of GitHub actions or streamlining of activities. And then the third approach is the same, but with ML flow and other open source components added on top, which will make your life even easier and better. So what does option one look like? Something like this. And I'm not going to go into the details of this, but this is a standard approach within Microsoft Azure, where you will have a dev environment, which you'll see on the top here, development environment for building your pipelines. You have a place to train, test, validate, register the models, which is on the right side. And then the lower stack, you can see the production deployment and operational model, which is deployed out there. So this kind of gives you three portions or pieces that can be connected together, integrated and streamlined so that your life becomes easy. If you look at it from a semi-automated fashion, the one option number two I was talking about, you can pretty much take GitHub Actions and GitLabs and other tools like that and plug and play these components together to manually automate through command line interfaces or through other mechanisms of calling APIs and streamlining these activities of releasing pickled files, configuration files, scoring scripts, etc. So these are two options. Now the third option, which I'm going to quickly show you a small demo of right after this, is that if you're using open source tools, how will it work with Databricks? What are the downstream impacts and how those models are served out there and how things can be streamlined in a simple and easy manner. I have personally experienced this along with Azure ML, and there are pros and cons of various approaches. I would suggest that you use the one which makes most sense based on the maturity of your team and the ability to adapt or modify based on business needs. So in option number three, you get a little bit more control over continuous integration and continuous deployment, and you can still plug and play with Azure DevOps or other external tools to orchestrate the end-to-end experience for data scientists and help them collaborate together. So what does it mean? It means that we need to tailor to the specific needs of the environment for MLOps and even for data ops. We need to have a life cycle, and for each portion of this life cycle, whether it is creating models or automating the rollout or automating the audit trail or deploying monitoring performance or observing data drift, concept drift, other issues. These 4 or 5 things need to be taken into consideration and tailored based on the need of the organization. And approach it in a very holistic fashion so that it really helps people. So what would I suggest to you, right? When you're starting off initially, start by testing in a pilot mode. Get some quick results so that you're not stuck in, like a continuous loop of architecture and design. Start with just selecting a basic model, import the model, validate it, deploy it, test this life cycle and see whether it can be improved further or what can be done. Break it down into 3 areas: the data pipeline, the modeling pipeline or build pipeline for model, and release pipeline. 3 blocks that you see here, green, blue, and the other color. And essentially, once you've done that, you can automate pieces of that and release it out there. And I'll show you this example with the data pipeline. And this is using tools which come with Databricks today with open source Delta Lake and open source Delta sharing. On top of it, whether it is streaming data or batch data, you can take all of the data and pass it through your data lakes or lake house, warehouse, and make sure that you deal with, providing that data to the relevant consumers needing this. But how do you do that? You do it using existing tools and new tools that are being released every day. Jobs orchestration, Delta live tables, autoloader type of ingestion mechanisms or third-party tools. And think of it like this, right? If you can automate it, then there should be a workflow. If there's a workflow, and this is the sequence example of a workflow from ingestion to orders to matching to building features, you can put them in a directed acyclic graph and then use that to help you automate and manage the process. So this is kind of a data pipeline that can be released for, let's say, taxi analysis or prediction analysis around transportation. Just a quick example, but to show you that all of this can be done very simply, but with some amount of automation so that whatever is being done in dev can then be replicated in staging and production as well. Now, if you look at it beyond the data pipeline, the ML modeling pipeline itself can be improved and automated as well. And there are certain design considerations and certain build considerations that we need to take into mind when we are working on this kind of environment. So I won't go through each and every bullet point in this particular case due to the time available. But as you can see here, for each of these steps, we can make sure there is no data drift, make sure it is reduced, make sure that the impact is not there on the model or the concept drift that will happen eventually as you load more and more and more data into this environment. So keep that in mind to think about how we should scale this now. So we have the basic foundation, we have the data pipeline, we have the build, but now we need to roll it out and productionalize or commercialize this. And this has been a request coming in from many companies out there, whether they're healthcare or retail or financial companies or manufacturing or, there are so many industries, they're all trying to use AI. And the problem where they are getting stuck is in rolling it out or scaling their activities. So this could be like a cyclic program, a structured program that we can go through and do rapid iteration and ensure that these pilots are converted to commercial release production environment models. So I'll show you a quick lab showcase here. This is the showcase I'm going to show you right now. I'm assuming you can see these pieces which are shown over here, whether you're using TensorFlows or you're using XGBoost or any third-party algorithm or model. All of these models have to go through some kind of model registry and tracking, some kind of serving, and if essentially that serving results in large scale or batch or streaming type of deployment so that on the edge or on the device itself, people can consume a lot of these AI models. So let me just show you a quick view of a notebook here in Databricks on Microsoft Azure. As you can see, this is MLflow, using MLflow. So we import certain libraries. For that, we load the data associated with the prediction. In this case, we're trying to predict using these X features that are listed over there. And then we have Y variable or the target that we want to focus on predicting. So there are actual values and predicted values. And this is the way we load the data into the system. We store it in the right arrays and the right matrices that you can see here. Then we split it into 75-25% split so that we can train with 75% and test with 25%. And then once all of this is put into place, then we can visualize and make sure all the data is good. As you can see here, using certain tools, matplotlib utilized here. Once you have done that and the model is now trained, now you want to make sure this MLflow experiment is being tracked and monitored. So you go through these steps, run MLflow, and the model's output is stored in one place. It's being tracked. There's a registry action that takes place after this. And you'll see from model MLflow tracking to registry, all of these elements are considered when you use Databricks and MLflow together. And once these models are run, then these models, as you can see here, registered models, they'll go through a process of logging and control. And then we promote it from dev to staging to production. As you can see here, this is being done through scripts, but all of this can be automated and done through user interface, UX, as well as through automated jobs. So here's an example of the output or outcome of an experiment. Once that experiment was run with this specific model, that model was released and being validated. And once you click on that experiment, you'll see this model is ready for inference. And it's staged in production now. It's in production. And once it's put in production, you can test it, validate as well over there. As you can see here, there's a version control. And you can have multiple versions of these models. And whichever is appropriate can be served out with an endpoint. This is the model URL endpoint. And then you can test that URL endpoint here, right, by sending in a request and getting a response out of it. So I hope this helps you kind of imagine the possibilities of operationalizing things. In a very short 2-minute, 3-minute clip, I've shown you a sequence of activities for deploying and serving these endpoints. And once these models are ready for commercial use, they can be consumed from any of those endpoints that are available to you. So moving ahead from this demo, right, that I've shown you quickly, I'll just talk about a case study of where this was applied in the healthcare space with a medication management platform company. I'm not sure whether you've heard about this, but in the US, it's become a great case study today, where pharmacies and this medication management platform provider working together. And I was involved in helping them with the AI lab activity. In this specific case, they were trying to see that when you go into a pharmacy or try to get medicines from a chemist, what is the effectiveness of that? Machine learning prediction models were being deployed for that effectiveness and whether we should sell more of the right kind of drugs to help them get the right remedies. So in this particular case, they had data in old storage, on-prem storage and AWS cloud, and they were trying to bring it all together in one place. There were no standards. There was no operationalization. There were a lot of tiny experiments running all over the place. And our team recommended a better way to do these things. Like I showed you before with the architecture and streamlining, we used certain tools, we plugged and played, we looked at the cost analysis, we looked at the people usage analysis, and we looked at the way we can streamline the overall process, design a process which will make their life easier. So doing that, we were able to take their predictive models and productionalize that. And using existing services, as you can see here, and existing Databricks clusters along with Azure DevOps tools, we were able to deploy it, and that helped them improve the patient's health by making sure the right predictions were available at the right time, right place. So this kind of a quick case study example. I hope this helps you understand the great use of this. We have also been involved in clinical drug trial predictions and improvements around that whole process. In fact, it has helped companies, life sciences companies, Gilead Sciences type of companies, where they've been able to speed up the whole thing and deploy COVID vaccines quickly into the market after the trial and testing. And all this because of the operationalization and streamlining of all the models that are necessary to be moved into production quickly. So this is a quick story. In summary, my presentation tries to focus on data ops, MLOps, and DevOps. And if you look at it holistically, we need to look at the best practices for infrastructure, making sure that you're leveraging auto scaling and some of the centralization features around data pipelines. We need to look at distributed training so that you're not spending too much time or money on that aspect, but using the right parameters, right batching approaches. We're able to deploy to the edge, whichever model that you use, whether it is TensorFlow or something else, and then make sure that is put in a right container so that it can be consumed by others, and then monitor any kind of side effects or issues that come out of a commercial model that is coming out there. So these are summary. In summary, we can achieve simplification, whether it is semi or full automation in the whole MLOps lifecycle management by focusing on these 7 elements that I had mentioned before. Automation, trying to automate as much as you can, putting in CI, CD, CT, version control, experiment tracking, testing, deploying, validation, monitoring and analyzing, and then making sure that AI that scales and easily reused in the right way, consistent way, in a responsible AI way. That's my presentation.